Yesterday, President Cyril Ramphosa made history when he appointed Advocate Shamila Batohi as South Africa's first female National Director of Public Prosecutions, or NDPP. Batohi formerly served as the Director of Prosecutions in KwaZulu-Natal and works as a senior legal advisor at the International Criminal Court. She will take over her position as the National Director of Public Prosecutions in February. Joining us now to discuss the new NPA boss is Nicole Fritz, the Executive Director of Freedom Under Law. Good to see you, Nicole. Thanks for coming in again.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So when you heard the announcement yesterday, what was your immediate reaction?
My immediate reaction was that she is eminently qualified for this post. I think she has as good a chance as any to actually get this right. I think the task ahead of her is so enormous.
Yeah.
That it is going to take time, and this appointment in and of itself is not going to turn the National Prosecuting Authority around, but it gives us the greatest possible chance of a new dawn for the National Prosecuting Authority, for a return of integrity, of the public's confidence in the National Prosecuting Authority. So we wish her well.
Yeah, it's important at a time like this, because the NPA has been a very, very I struggle to find the words, but this particular position has been one that's been shrouded in controversy for years and years and years, and yet it is possibly one of the most important positions in this country. And now let's talk through the process, because we haven't seen a process like this in years, whether we talk about the Mbeki years, whether we talk about the Zuma years. I mean, towards the end of the Zuma years, we were actually just issued with a press release saying, okay, your new public prosecutor is Sean Abrams, and then it was Mxolisi Nkazana. No such thing as public hearings, press conferences, addresses by them. We never saw that. We haven't seen this in years. So is this already giving us the sense that things are about to change?
Yes, and I think I think it's so important to stress that process, because it's not just about the appointment, which obviously, as I said, I think a candidate who is eminently suitable has been appointed. But it was a process that has allowed us to trust in the appointment. So as the public, we know it wasn't only the president who made that appointment. He was informed of the views and the considerations of an eminent panel, and that panel then, referred their recommendations to him. And that we were able to scrutinise those hearings. There was a public. They were public, and as you say, it was not. We've never seen a process like this.
No.
In terms of the Constitution, the president is alone entitled to make the appointment. He, I think, in order to try and ensure public confidence, appointed that panel. He wasn't required to do so. And so I think that the process itself allows us to trust and to have faith in this appointment.
Yeah.
So that has been, I think, of enormous value.
Yeah. I mean, when we saw that it was a woman that was going to be taking over this as a position, so she's been a number of firsts, and I think the big first was that she was the first female also in KwaZulu-Natal to be the NDPP there. But now taking on this job as a woman is also a significant move for women in this country. And what do you think that represents in itself?
So I agree. I think what we have to recall, obviously, is that we have had Nomqobo Jiba acting as National Director of Public Prosecution. So it's not, albeit in an acting capacity, but we have had a woman sort of serving in the top echelons as the leader of the National Prosecuting Authority. I don't think her tenure, the period at which she was at the helm of the National Prosecuting Authority, was historic for justice or for women. But I do think, if we are to see the National Prosecuting Authority return to integrity under a woman leader, that would be wonderful. And I think it sends a message. And I would say this: I think we have seen the presidency really make some very key appointments that are women. So we've seen the inquiry into Ms. Jiba and Mr. Mwebi, all headed by women lawyers. And I think, at this point, women have long served in the judiciary, at the top echelons of our legal profession. We know they're as capable. And it's been a long time coming that they should be occupying these positions of leadership. And that's great. Yeah. And as I said, everything would suggest that she might be able to lead the National Prosecuting Authority to return.
Yeah, and certainly when you look at the plight of women, and we sit in these 16 days of activism, the women in South Africa are truly an abused a portion of the population. We talk about rape, we talk about the abuse of women, and this is a big issue that South Africa has, and perhaps having someone in this position, we might finally see some results. Like we say, we don't want to put too much on her shoulders and sort of think that, you know, everything's going to change. Things are never that simple, but it appears that there may be more hope for women.
I think that that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we saw in her address yesterday, she spoke about sort of standing for ordinary South Africans, standing with them in the fight. And I think that there is this sense that she is going to respond to their concerns, as she must, if there is to be a return of confidence to the National Prosecuting Authority. And it's obviously, state capture is important,
yeah,
and on everyone's lips at the moment. And she spoke specifically about responding to that. But I think it's about more than state capture. And as you've indicated, you know, it is a crisis in South Africa that we continue to see the levels of violence against women that we do.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's obviously we want somebody who is personally qualified, and there is everything to suggest that she is. But we also want somebody who symbolically plays this role of justice. And as you say, I think the indication is that she would be responsive to those concerns, and concerns for sexual violence and abuse is obviously a huge concern, a primary concern for many women in this country.
Yeah, it really is, and it's going to be quite a difficult task for her to go ahead. I mean, if we look at former heads of the NPA, has anyone actually lasted the full 10 years?
No.
No one has ever lasted the 10 years. And that in itself is a very big problem, because you see the pressure on this particular position. I wonder if this is going to be the lady that manages to fulfill that role.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that I would say is that it's interesting that she spent almost a decade at the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
Now, the International Criminal Court is a very different institution from the National Prosecuting Authority. It's not driven by, I don't think it is driven by the factionalism and infighting that we see within the National Prosecuting Authority. But it is an institution that has been subject to enormous criticism and has come under enormous pressure from very powerful states like the United States. And I think she will have gained experience there of just putting your head out, sort of trying to, you know, deafen yourself to the noise outside and do the work that is required to be done. And I think that that's important, an important experience to bring to bear as the head of the National Prosecuting Authority.
Yeah, because, I mean, having experience like that, and that you can never take away from someone. I mean, she's had huge experience. I think she was there from 2009 at the International Criminal Court, and yet still having involvement here back home in South Africa with her tenure in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's kind of like she's almost stayed away from the drama and yet has still been a part of all of it. One of the things that the president did say, and I look at this, he said that the country needs an NPA that is above reproach and that is able to take independent and impartial decisions, a thing that it has not been able to do in the past years. With the shift, with the speaking of our president, with this whole campaign to try and get institutions independent, I mean, can we believe the rhetoric? Can we believe that this organization is finally going to be able to do what it is there to do?
Look, I think the fact that we have had the appointment of such a strong candidate is hopeful. But you know, I think we will need to see how this pans out. I mean, you speak about the history, and we have a history where no National Director of Public Prosecutions has served their full 10 years, and often they've had to leave having been subjected to enormous pressure. We see that in the case of Mr. Nkosana, who was essentially forced out, and he was given a golden handshake of 17 million, so there was a substantial carrot offered him. But there have been those public pressures, and so we as the public have to be concerned, and we'll have to watch how this plays out. But I do think the fact that if you were planning to bring the institution under political pressure, you wouldn't have appointed so strong a candidate. I think that that's certainly a hopeful sign.
If we look at her coming in February, I mean, there is so much on her desk. I wouldn't even know where to begin. But in your opinion, where do you think she should begin? Because if I may just sort of maybe put an idea at you, the NPA is so divided right now. It is an organization that has divisions and allegiances in many different directions. So I can imagine that would be one of her priorities, is to try and bring the NPA into a solid platform that everybody's on the same page. But perhaps you have a different idea of what her priority should be.
I think that that's absolutely right, and we saw her do that yesterday again in her address to sort of prosecutors, saying, I will stand with every prosecutor sort of as they, whatever corridors they may walk. So I think that her priority one of her key priorities will be to try and stabilise the National Prosecuting Authority, to try and afford some sense of unity. I think she will need to stop the hemorrhaging of those staff who've got the deep forensic investigative prosecutorial skills, and to try and bring into the institution new talent, new skills, so that the enormous number of cases that are sitting there on their desks can be processed, can be proceeded with. So I think,
and difficult cases. I mean, we've got Ace Magashule sitting there. We've got the Zondo Commission sitting there. I mean, we've got things that our former President Jacob Zuma have been in, and these are things that she has to make decisions on.
Absolutely, enormously complex cases, and not only cases that are kind of politically alive, where she might be subject to political pressures here and now, but cases relating to state capture. But one also has to be conscious of the fact that this is an institution that needs to respond to a legacy of criminality that remains unaddressed. So there are apartheid era cases that will need to go ahead, and we're talking about perpetrators now who are fairly old, witnesses who are old, who might have died.
Recommendations from the TRC that were never, ever adopted.
Difficulties of marshalling that evidence together. So they're on a number of levels, and in respect of a number of important cases, there are going to be stiff challenges.
So, as excited as we may be at the appointment of an incredible lady into this position, it's a position that holds a lot of pressure, and we hope that she can see it through. Nicole Fritz, thanks so much for being with us here to talk about the new appointment. Nicole is the Executive Director of Freedom Under Law, talking to us about the newly appointed head of the NPA, and that, of course, is Advocate Shamila Batohi. We did invite the NPA to be a part of this discussion. They declined our invitation, but I'm sure we will be talking to them in the not-so-distant future. Let's take a break. When we return,